Marcus Rivera stood at the edge of his new property and took a deep breath. The Texas air smelled different here. It was clean and fresh. Nothing like the dusty places he had been for the last 10 years. Behind him, the moving truck rumbled as the workers carried boxes into the old farmhouse. His wife Elena was directing them where to put everything. Their two kids, Sophia and Miguel, were already exploring the barn. "Dad, this place is huge," Sophia called out. She was 15 and had never lived anywhere with this much space. Miguel, who was 13, was climbing on an old tractor that came with the property. Marcus smiled. This was exactly what he wanted for his family. After serving as a Navy SEAL for over a decade, he was ready for peace. The ranch was 15 acres of rolling hills and open sky. The house needed work, but it was solid. Built in 1952, it had thick walls and good bones. The previous owner, an elderly farmer named Joe Patterson, had taken good care of it. "You picked a good spot," Elena said, walking up beside him. She was holding a cup of coffee and looking out at the fields. "The kids love it already," Marcus nodded. "It's perfect. No neighbors close by, no noise. Just us and the land." He had saved every penny during his military service for this moment. The ranch cost more than he wanted to spend, but it was worth it. After years of living on military bases and deploying to dangerous places, he wanted his family to have roots. The nearest town was 15 miles away. The closest neighbor was half a mile down the road. When Marcus bought the property, the real estate agent told him it was in an unincorporated area. That meant no city rules or regulations to worry about. He could build what he wanted and live how he wanted. The first few weeks were perfect. Marcus spent his days fixing the fence and cleaning up the barn. Elena planted a garden behind the house. The kids helped with chores and rode their bikes on the dirt roads. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and watched the sunset. Marcus felt the tension leave his body for the first time in years. He started building a small workshop in the barn. During his military service, he had learned to work with his hands. He wanted a place to fix things and maybe build furniture. The old barn had plenty of space and good light. Marcus worked slowly, enjoying every minute. There was no rush, no deadline, no mission to complete. Elena got a job at the local school as a teacher. She drove into town every day while Marcus worked on the ranch. The kids would start school in the fall, but for now they were enjoying their summer freedom. They helped Marcus with projects and learned to take care of the animals they planned to get. "We should get some chickens," Sophia suggested one day. "And maybe a goat." "Slow down," Marcus laughed. "Let me finish the workshop first." Everything was going according to plan. Marcus had his retirement pay and some savings. Elena's new job would help with expenses. They were building the quiet life they had always dreamed about. The ranch felt like a world away from the chaos and danger Marcus had known in the military. Then the letter came. It was a Tuesday morning in July. Marcus was drinking coffee on the porch when he saw the mailman coming up the drive. That was unusual. Mail was usually delivered to the box at the end of the road. The mailman handed him a thick envelope with an official-looking return address. Sunset Hills Homeowners Association, the envelope said in fancy letters. Marcus frowned. He had never heard of any homeowners association. When he bought the property, nobody mentioned anything about an HOA. He opened the letter carefully. "Dear property owner," it began. "Welcome to the Sunset Hills community. As a member of our homeowners association, you are required to follow all community guidelines and regulations." Marcus read the letter twice. It listed his address correctly, but everything else seemed wrong. The letter said his property was part of the Sunset Hills HOA and that he owed annual dues of $2,400. It also said he had several violations that needed to be fixed immediately. According to the letter, Marcus was breaking rules by parking his 1995 Ford pickup truck in his driveway, building structures without HOA approval, planning to keep farm animals on residential property, not maintaining his lawn to community standards. Marcus looked around his property. His truck was parked where it belonged. The workshop was barely started. They didn't even have any animals yet. And what lawn? Most of his property was natural grass and wildflowers. The letter was signed by someone named Robert Whitman, HOA president. At the bottom it said Marcus had 30 days to fix all violations or face legal action. "Elena," Marcus called into the house. "Come look at this." Elena read the letter with a confused expression. "This doesn't make sense." We're not part of any homeowners association. The real estate agent never mentioned anything like this. Marcus pulled out the papers from when he bought the property. He read through every document carefully. There was no mention of an HOA anywhere. The property deed showed his land as unincorporated county land, not part of any planned community. This has to be a mistake, Elena said. Maybe they sent it to the wrong address, but the address was correct. So was Marcus's name. Someone had done their homework. That afternoon, Marcus drove to the county courthouse. He wanted to research this Sunset Hills HOA and find out what was going on. The clerk helped him look up property records and association filings. What he found made him angry. The Sunset Hills Homeowners Association was registered just 2 years ago. It was started by a group of developers who had bought land around the area. According to the paperwork, they planned to build a luxury housing community. But Marcus's ranch and several other properties were already there. They had been there for decades. The HOA filing claimed authority over a large area that included Marcus's ranch, but there was no legal basis for this claim. The developers had simply drawn lines on a map and declared themselves in charge. Marcus drove home feeling frustrated. Someone was trying to scam him, but he wasn't sure what they really wanted. The letter seemed official, but it was based on false claims. His property was not part of any HOA, and he didn't owe anyone any money. "What are we going to do?" Elena asked when he explained what he had found. "Nothing," Marcus said. "We're going to ignore it. This is our land, and we have the right to live here however we want." But Marcus had a feeling this wasn't going to be simple. In the military, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. The letter was too detailed and too aggressive for a simple mistake. That night, Marcus made sure all the doors were locked. Old habits from his SEAL training made him check the perimeter of the property before bed. Everything looked normal, but he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was coming. He had no idea how right he was. Marcus thought the letter was a one-time mistake. He was wrong. 3 days after the first letter, another one arrived. This time it was marked urgent second notice in red letters. The tone was much more aggressive. "Mr. Rivera," it read, "you have failed to respond to our initial compliance notice. Your continued violations are unacceptable and must be corrected immediately." The letter listed new violations that made no sense. According to the HOA, Marcus was now also breaking rules by having unauthorized gravel in his driveway and excessive vegetation on his property. The gravel had been there when he bought the place. The vegetation was just natural Texas wildflowers and grass. The letter demanded that Marcus remove his pickup truck from the property entirely, stop all construction on the workshop, remove all gravel from the driveway and replace it with HOA-approved materials, cut down the wildflowers and plant-approved grass, pay $5,000 in fines for the violations at the bottom. The letter threatened legal action if Marcus didn't comply within 10 days. Elena was worried. "Maybe we should talk to a lawyer," she said. "This is ridiculous," Marcus replied. "They have no authority over our property. I'm not paying them a dime." Marcus decided to visit Robert Whitman in person. The HOA office address was listed as a building in the nearby town. When Marcus arrived, he found it was just a small rented office in a strip mall. A young woman at the front desk told him Mr. Whitman was in meetings all day and couldn't see anyone without an appointment. "I just want to clear up a misunderstanding about my property," Marcus explained. "All communication must be in writing," the woman said without looking up from her computer. Marcus wrote a polite letter, explaining that his property was not part of the HOA and asking them to remove him from their records. He hand-delivered it to the office and asked for a receipt. The woman stamped a copy and gave it back to him. A week passed with no response. Marcus continued working on his workshop and living his normal life. Then the harassment started getting worse. First, a county code enforcement officer showed up at his door. A nervous-looking man in a county uniform said he had received complaints about unpermitted construction on the property. "What construction?" Marcus asked. "The shed you're building in the barn," the officer said, reading from a clipboard. Marcus walked him out to the barn and showed him the small workshop area. It was just a workbench and some tool storage. Nothing that required permits. "This isn't new construction," Marcus explained. "I'm just organizing space that was already here." The officer looked around and scratched his head. "Well, it looks fine to me, but I had to check because we got a formal complaint." "Who made the complaint?" Marcus asked. Anonymous, the officer said. But they seem to know a lot of details about your property. After the officer left, Marcus called the county to ask about the complaint. The clerk told him it had come from someone claiming to represent the Sunset Hills HOA. They had sent detailed photos and a written report claiming Marcus was building illegal structures. The next week, another county official arrived. This time it was someone from the health department investigating a complaint about improper waste disposal. Again, there was no problem. Marcus had a proper septic system that had been inspected when he bought the property. Someone said you were dumping sewage in the creek, the inspector explained. What creek? Marcus asked. The nearest water was a small pond half a mile away. The inspector apologized and left. But Marcus was starting to see a pattern. Someone was making false reports to get government officials to harass him. The phone call started next. Late at night, the house phone would ring. When Marcus answered, no one would speak. Sometimes he could hear breathing or muffled voices in the background. Elena started unplugging the phone before bed. Then came the letters in the mailbox. Not official HOA letters, but anonymous notes printed on plain paper. They all said the same basic thing: you don't belong here. Leave now before things get worse. One morning, Marcus found that someone had scattered nails in his driveway during the night. He spent an hour picking them up before Elena could drive to work. The next day, someone had spray-painted "Go Home" on his mailbox. Marcus called the sheriff's office to report the vandalism. A deputy came out and took a report, but said there wasn't much they could do without witnesses or evidence. Probably just kids, the deputy said. Happens sometimes when new people move to the area. But Marcus knew this wasn't random vandalism. The timing was too convenient. Someone was trying to make his life difficult. The worst incident happened on a Saturday morning. Marcus was working in the barn when he heard Elena scream from the house. He ran outside to find her standing in the driveway, pointing at their car. Someone had slashed all 4 tires overnight. That's it, Marcus said. This has gone too far. He called the sheriff again. This time, a different deputy came out. Deputy Johnson was older and more experienced. He looked at the slashed tires and the damage to the mailbox with a serious expression. This isn't kids, he said. Someone's targeting you specifically. Any idea who might want to cause you trouble? Marcus told him about the HOA letters and the fake complaints to the county. Deputy Johnson took notes and asked to see the letters. Sunset Hills HOA, he said, reading one of them. I've heard that name before. Let me do some checking and get back to you. 3 days later, Deputy Johnson called Marcus. I talked to some other property owners in the area, he said. You're not the only one getting harassed by this HOA. Maria Santos, who owns the farm 2 miles from you, has been dealing with the same thing for months. Marcus drove over to meet Maria Santos. She was an elderly woman who had owned her family farm for 30 years. Her story was almost identical to Marcus's. The HOA had sent her demanding letters, claiming her farm was violating community standards. When she ignored them, the harassment escalated. They want us to sell, Maria explained. That's what this is really about. They're trying to scare us into leaving so they can buy our land cheap. Maria showed Marcus some research she had done. The developers behind the Sunset Hills HOA had been buying up property in the area for 2 years. They wanted to build a luxury housing development, but several longtime property owners were in the way. They can't force us to sell legally, Maria said, so they're trying to make our lives so miserable that we'll give up and leave. Marcus felt his anger building. He had served his country for over 10 years, fighting to protect people's freedom. Now someone was trying to steal his own freedom in his own backyard. What can we do about it? He asked. I've been documenting everything, Maria said. Every letter, every fake complaint, every incident. My lawyer says if we can prove they're harassing us systematically, we might have a case. Marcus went home and started his own documentation. He made copies of all the letters and took photos of the vandalism. He also installed security cameras around his property. If someone was going to keep messing with his family, he wanted evidence. The cameras proved to be a smart investment. 2 nights later, they caught a pickup truck driving slowly past the house at 2 a.m. The truck stopped at the mailbox, and someone got out to leave another threatening note. Marcus had the license plate number. He called Deputy Johnson, who ran the plates and found the truck was registered to a company called Security Solutions LLC. When they investigated further, They found that Security Solutions was owned by the same group of developers who ran the Sunset Hills HOA. "Now we're getting somewhere," Deputy Johnson said. "This isn't random harassment anymore. This is a conspiracy." But Marcus had a feeling things were about to get a lot worse before they got better. In his military experience, when people started getting desperate, they usually escalated to more dangerous tactics. He was right to be worried. The fake police were coming next. Tuesday morning started like any other day. Marcus was in the barn working on his workshop when he heard a car coming up the driveway. Elena had already left for work and the kids were at summer camp. Marcus wasn't expecting any visitors. He looked out the barn door and saw a white police car pulling up to the house. Two men in police uniforms got out and started walking toward the barn. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and went to meet them. "Morning, officers," Marcus said. "What can I do for you?" The first officer was a big man with a thick mustache. His uniform was dark blue with patches that said County Police. The second officer was younger and thinner. Both men wore sunglasses and had serious expressions. "Are you Marcus Rivera?" the big officer asked. "Yes, sir. I'm Officer Davis and this is Officer Martinez. We have a warrant for your arrest." Marcus felt his stomach drop. A warrant? For what? "Multiple zoning violations and failure to comply with community regulations," Officer Davis said. He pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. "You need to come with us." Something didn't feel right. Marcus had dealt with police many times during his military service. These officers seemed different somehow. Their behavior was too aggressive, too rushed. "Can I see some identification?" Marcus asked politely. Officer Davis frowned. "We already told you who we are. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I just want to see your badges and ID cards," Marcus said. "That's my right." The two officers looked at each other. Officer Martinez stepped closer to Marcus. "You're being difficult, Mr. Rivera. We're trying to do this the easy way." Marcus's military training was kicking in. Years of combat experience had taught him to notice details that others might miss. He started looking more carefully at the two officers. Their uniforms looked wrong. The patches didn't match what he had seen on other county officers. The badges were shiny and new, not worn like real police badges. Their equipment belts had the right gear, but it was positioned strangely like they weren't used to wearing it. "What department did you say you're from?" Marcus asked. "County Police," Officer Davis repeated. "Now stop asking questions and come with us." Marcus knew there was no county police department in this area. There was the sheriff's department and the state police, but no county police. He also noticed that neither officer had turned on the dash cam or body camera that real police always use during arrests. "I'd like to call my lawyer before I go anywhere," Marcus said. "No phone calls," Officer Martinez said. "You can call from the station." That was another red flag. People being arrested always had the right to call a lawyer. Marcus started backing toward the barn door, keeping both officers in sight. "Let me just get my keys and wallet from inside," Marcus said. "No," Officer Davis said sharply. "You're coming now." Both officers stepped toward Marcus. Officer Martinez put his hand on his handcuffs. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Marcus's SEAL training took over. In dangerous situations, he had learned to assess threats quickly and respond appropriately. These men were not real police officers. They were trying to kidnap him from his own property. "I'm going to call 911 to verify this warrant," Marcus said, pulling out his cell phone. "Drop the phone," Officer Davis shouted. He reached for his gun. That was the moment Marcus knew for certain these were fake cops. Real police don't draw weapons on someone for making a phone call. Marcus had less than a second to decide what to do. Officer Martinez lunged forward to grab Marcus's phone. Marcus used a basic SEAL defense move, grabbing the fake officer's wrist and using his momentum to throw him to the ground. The man hit the dirt hard and his fake badge scattered. Officer Davis was pulling his gun when Marcus moved on him. Marcus grabbed the man's gun hand and twisted it upward, preventing him from aiming. With his other hand, he struck a pressure point on the fake officer's neck. The man dropped immediately. Both fake officers were on the ground in less than 10 seconds. Marcus quickly secured their weapons and used zip ties from his workshop to restrain their hands. The whole encounter had been silent except for some grunting and the sound of bodies hitting the ground. "Elena," Marcus called out, then remembered she was at work. He called 911 instead. 911, what's your emergency? This is Marcus Rivera at 1247 County Road 45. I've just been attacked by two men impersonating police officers. I have them restrained on my property.
I need real officers here immediately. Are you injured, sir?
No, I'm fine. But these men tried to arrest me with fake warrants. They're armed and dangerous. While waiting for real police to arrive, Marcus searched the fake officers. He found their wallets, fake ID cards, and the fake warrant they had tried to serve. The warrant was printed on regular paper and had obvious spelling mistakes. It wasn't even close to looking official. The fake officer Davis was starting to wake up. "You're in big trouble," he groaned. "You just assaulted police officers." "You're not police officers," Marcus said calmly. "Real cops don't try to kidnap people from their homes." Marcus also searched their police car. It looked official from a distance, but up close it was obviously fake. The lights and sirens were cheap aftermarket equipment. The radio didn't work. There were no official police computers or equipment inside. The real police arrived 15 minutes later. Deputy Johnson led a team of 4 officers who surrounded the fake police car with their guns drawn. "Marcus, are you okay?" Deputy Johnson called out. "I'm fine. The 2 suspects are restrained by the barn." The real officers took over the scene. They checked Marcus's restraints and read the fake officers their rights. Marcus handed over the fake warrant and ID cards he had found. "These are pretty convincing fakes," Deputy Johnson said, examining the badges. "Someone spent money on this setup." The fake officers were loaded into real police cars. Before they left, Marcus heard one of them talking to Deputy Johnson. "We were hired by a security company," the fake officer Martinez said. "They told us this guy was dangerous and needed to be brought in for questioning." "What security company?" Deputy Johnson asked. "Security Solutions. They said they had legal authority to make arrests for civil violations." Marcus smiled grimly. Security Solutions was the same company that owned the truck caught on his security cameras. The same company owned by the HOA developers. The pieces were starting to come together. "These aren't random criminals," Marcus told Deputy Johnson. "This is connected to the HOA harassment. Someone paid these guys to kidnap me from my own property." Deputy Johnson nodded. "We'll get to the bottom of this. But I have to ask, how did you take down 2 armed men by yourself?" Marcus shrugged. "Navy SEAL training. Old habits die hard. Remind me never to try to arrest you illegally," Deputy Johnson said with a grin. After the police left, Marcus called Elena at work to tell her what happened. She was terrified and wanted to come home immediately. "I'm fine," Marcus assured her. "But this proves we're dealing with criminals, not just annoying neighbors. These people are willing to commit serious felonies to get what they want." Marcus also called Maria Santos to warn her. If they had tried to kidnap him, they might target her next. "Be careful," he told her. "Don't trust anyone claiming to be police unless you can verify their identity. These people are getting desperate." That evening, Marcus reviewed the security camera footage of the fake arrest attempt. The cameras had captured everything, including the fake officers admitting they were hired by Security Solutions. The evidence was clear and undeniable. Marcus felt angry but also relieved. For weeks he had been dealing with mysterious harassment and vandalism. Now he knew who was behind it and how far they were willing to go. The developers wanted his land so badly they were willing to commit kidnapping to get it. But they had made a big mistake. They had attacked a Navy SEAL on his own property. Marcus had spent years fighting enemies who threatened innocent people. He wasn't about to let some greedy developers terrorize his family and neighbors. The war was officially on. And Marcus had every intention of winning. The moment Marcus saw the fake badges scatter across the ground, everything changed. His mind shifted into combat mode, the same mental state that had kept him alive through dozens of dangerous missions overseas. Time seemed to slow down as his SEAL training took complete control. He had less than 3 seconds to neutralize 2 armed men who were trying to kidnap him. In the military, Marcus had learned that hesitation in a life-threatening situation meant death. There was no time to think, only time to act. The fake officer Martinez was closest, reaching for Marcus's phone with his left hand while his right hand moved toward his weapon. Marcus grabbed Martinez's extended wrist and used a technique called a wrist control takedown. He twisted the man's arm in a direction it wasn't meant to go while stepping to the side. Martinez's own forward momentum carried him to the ground hard. As Martinez hit the dirt, Marcus was already moving on the second attacker. Officer Davis had cleared his weapon from its holster and was trying to bring it up to aim. Marcus used a gun disarm technique he had practiced thousands of times in training. He grabbed Davis's gun hand with both of his own hands, twisting the weapon upward so it couldn't be pointed at him. At the same time, Marcus drove his elbow into a pressure point on Davis's neck just below the ear. The strike didn't cause permanent damage, but it shut down the fake officer's nervous system temporarily. Davis dropped like a stone. Both attackers were on the ground in 8 seconds. Marcus quickly kicked their weapons away from their bodies and checked to make sure they were breathing. Both men were alive but unconscious or stunned. Marcus's heart was pounding, but his mind was clear. This was exactly the kind of situation his military training had prepared him for. He moved quickly to secure the scene before the fake officers could recover. From his workshop, Marcus grabbed several zip ties that he used for organizing tools. He used them to bind both men's hands behind their backs. The zip ties were strong enough to hold them but wouldn't cut off circulation. Even though these men had tried to kidnap him, Marcus wasn't going to hurt them unnecessarily. He also secured their weapons in his workshop, making sure to handle them carefully to preserve fingerprints. Marcus knew the police would want to examine everything as evidence. While he waited for real police to arrive, Marcus searched the fake officers more thoroughly. In Martinez's wallet, he found a driver's license with the name Tony Martinez and an address in a city 2 hours away. There was also a business card for tactical security services and several credit cards. Davis's wallet contained similar items, including a business card for the same security company. Both men also carried fake police ID cards that looked convincing at first glance, but had obvious problems when examined closely. The badge numbers didn't follow the right format, and the photos looked like they had been taken at a mall photo booth. Most interesting was the fake arrest warrant they had tried to serve. It was printed on regular computer paper instead of official legal documents. The language was wrong, with phrases like community violations instead of actual criminal charges. At the bottom, it was signed by Judge Robert Whitman, the same Robert Whitman who was president of the Sunset Hills HOA. Marcus photographed everything with his phone before the real police arrived. He wanted his own record of the evidence in case anything disappeared later. When the fake officer Davis started to wake up, he immediately began threatening Marcus. "You're going to prison for assaulting police officers," he groaned. "You have no idea how much trouble you're in." "You're not police officers," Marcus said calmly. "Real cops don't try to kidnap people with fake warrants." "That warrant is real," Davis insisted. "We have authority to make arrests for civil violations." Marcus showed him the fake warrant. "This is signed by Robert Whitman, who runs a homeowners association. He's not a judge." "This whole thing is fake." Davis's face went pale. He seemed to realize for the first time that he had been lied to by whoever hired him. "They told us you were a dangerous criminal," Davis said weakly. "They said you had been threatening people and needed to be brought in for questioning." "Who told you that?" Marcus asked. "The guy from Security Solutions. He showed us official-looking papers and said this was a legitimate civil arrest warrant." Marcus was recording the conversation on his phone. Everything the fake officers said would be evidence that this was an organized conspiracy, not just a random crime. When Martinez woke up, he was less talkative but more honest. "Look, man, we're just contractors," he said. "We get hired to do security work." "We thought this was a legal job." "How much were you paid?" Marcus asked. $500 each for the day. "They said it would be easy. Just serve papers and bring you in for questioning." "Did they tell you to bring weapons?" Martinez hesitated. "They said you might resist because you were ex-military. They wanted us to be prepared." Marcus shook his head. These men had been manipulated into committing a serious crime. Someone had convinced them they were doing legitimate security work when they were actually committing kidnapping. When the real police arrived, Marcus cooperated fully. He showed them the fake warrant, the fake ID cards, and the recording of his conversations with the fake officers. He also gave them access to his security cameras, which had recorded the entire incident. Deputy Johnson watched the camera footage with interest. "This is incredible," he said. "You took down 2 armed men in less than 10 seconds. Navy SEAL training," Marcus explained. "We practice scenarios like this until the responses become automatic." "Were you ever in danger of seriously hurting these guys?" "No," Marcus said. "I used minimal force necessary to neutralize the threat. They'll have some bruises but no permanent damage." Deputy Johnson nodded approvingly. "You showed remarkable restraint. Most people would have been more violent in a situation like this." The fake officers were arrested and charged with impersonating police officers, attempted kidnapping, and conspiracy. As they were loaded into real police cars, Marcus heard Martinez talking to one of the arresting officers. "We were set up," Martinez said. "The guy who hired us made it sound completely legal. He showed us official papers and everything." "What guy?" the officer asked. "His name was Jim Walker. He works for Security Solutions. He said they had a contract with the county to handle civil violations." Marcus made a mental note of the name Jim Walker. That was another piece of the puzzle that connected back to the HOA and the developers. After the police left, Marcus called Elena again to give her a more detailed explanation of what had happened. "I can't believe someone tried to kidnap you," Elena said. She was crying. "What if you hadn't been able to fight them off?" "Don't think about that," Marcus said. "The important thing is that we now have proof of who's behind all the harassment. This isn't just annoying letters anymore. These people are serious criminals." Marcus also called Maria Santos to warn her about the fake police. "They might try the same thing with you," he told her. "Don't trust anyone claiming to be police unless you can verify their identity through 911. "Thank you for the warning," Maria said. "I can't believe they went this far." "It shows how desperate they are," Marcus replied. "They want our land so badly they're willing to commit kidnapping to get it." That evening, Marcus reviewed all the evidence he had collected. The fake police incident was clearly connected to the HOA harassment. The same people who had been sending threatening letters and making false complaints had now escalated to attempted kidnapping. But they had made a serious mistake. By attacking a Navy SEAL, they had given Marcus both the motivation and the evidence he needed to fight back effectively. Marcus had spent years fighting enemies who threatened innocent people. He wasn't going to let some greedy developers terrorize his family and neighbors. Marcus called his old commanding officer from the Navy. "Sir, I need some advice. I'm dealing with some criminals who are trying to steal property from veterans and elderly people." "What kind of help do you need?" his former CO asked. "Legal advice mostly. And maybe some contacts in federal law enforcement. These people are committing serious crimes and I want to make sure they face appropriate consequences." "Send me what you have," his CO said. "I know some people who specialize in civil rights violations and conspiracy cases." Marcus felt a grim satisfaction as he prepared the evidence package. The developers had wanted a war. Now they were going to get one. But they had picked the wrong enemy. Marcus had the training, the evidence, and the determination to see this through to the end. The fake police incident had changed everything. Now it was personal. Within hours of the fake police arrest, Detective Sarah Chen from the county's Major Crimes Unit took over the investigation. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who had spent 15 years investigating fraud and conspiracy cases. When she arrived at Marcus's ranch that evening, she brought a team of investigators and a forensics kit. "Mr. Rivera, what happened here today goes way beyond simple harassment," Detective Chen said as she examined the fake police equipment. "Impersonating police officers is a federal crime. So is conspiracy to commit kidnapping. We're looking at serious prison time for whoever organized this." Marcus showed her all the evidence he had collected over the past few weeks. The threatening letters, the fake HOA documents, the photos of vandalism, and the security camera footage. Detective Chen studied everything carefully. "This is incredibly well documented," she said. "You've basically done half our investigation for us." "I learned to keep good records in the military," Marcus explained. "When people are trying to hurt you, documentation can save your life." Detective Chen's team processed the fake police car and equipment for fingerprints and DNA evidence. They also interviewed the 2 fake officers who were being held in county jail on multiple felony charges. The next morning, Detective Chen called Marcus with an update. "Your fake officers are talking," she said. "They're claiming they were hired by Security Solutions LLC to perform what they thought was legitimate civil enforcement work. Do you believe them?" "Partially. I think they knew something was wrong, but they were paid enough money to ignore the red flags. The bigger question is who really hired Security Solutions." Detective Chen had already started investigating the company. Security Solutions LLC was registered as a private security firm, but it had only been in business for 6 months. The owner was listed as James Walker, but when investigators tried to contact him, they found the address was a fake mail drop. Someone set up this company specifically to provide cover for illegal activities, Detective Chen explained. "But we're going to trace the money trail and find out who's really behind it." Over the next few days, the investigation expanded rapidly. Detective Chen discovered that Marcus wasn't the only victim. She found records of at least 6 other property owners in the area who had been harassed by the fake Sunset Hills HOA. Maria Santos had been dealing with the harassment for 8 months. An elderly man named Frank Thompson had been getting threatening letters for 6 months. A young couple, David and Sarah Kim, had been targeted for 4 months after buying a small farm. All the victims had several things in common. They owned rural property that was valuable for development. They were either minorities, veterans, or elderly people who might be vulnerable to intimidation, and they had all refused to sell their land to developers who had made unsolicited offers. This is a systematic campaign of harassment designed to force people to sell their property below market value, Detective Chen told Marcus. It's not just criminal harassment, it's a civil rights violation. Detective Chen organized a meeting with all the victims at the county courthouse. Marcus was shocked to learn how widespread the harassment had been. Frank Thompson, who was 78 years old, had been getting fake code violation notices for months. They sent the fire department to my house 3 times, he said. Each time someone had called in a false report about dangerous conditions. The fire chief finally told me someone was filing fake complaints. David Kim, a computer programmer who had bought 5 acres to grow organic vegetables, had been dealing with vandalism and threatening phone calls. They slashed our garden hoses and poisoned our compost pile, he said. We were thinking about selling and moving back to the city. Sarah Kim added, we thought it was just bad neighbors. We had no idea it was organized. Detective Chen showed the group a map of all the affected properties. They formed a clear pattern around the area where the developers wanted to build their luxury housing project. You were all specifically targeted because your properties are in the way of a major development plan, she explained. The developers couldn't buy you out legally, so they decided to terrorize you into leaving. Marcus felt his anger building as he listened to the other victims' stories. These weren't just greedy business people. They were criminals who were willing to hurt innocent families to make money. What can we do about it? Maria Santos asked. We're going to prosecute everyone involved to the fullest extent of the law, Detective Chen said. But I need all of you to continue documenting everything. Keep records of every letter, every phone call, every suspicious incident. Detective Chen also had news about the investigation into Security Solutions. We traced the company's bank account, she said. The money trail leads back to a shell company called Whitman Development LLC. Marcus wasn't surprised to hear Robert Whitman's name again. He's the same guy who signed the fake HOA letters, he said. That's right. And Whitman Development is owned by a group of investors who have been buying up land in this area for 2 years. They're planning a project worth over $50 million. Detective Chen showed them architectural plans that had been filed with the county planning department. The proposed development would cover over 500 acres and include luxury homes, a golf course, and a shopping center. The investors had already spent millions buying land and getting permits. The problem is that several key properties are still owned by longtime residents who don't want to sell, Detective Chen explained. Without those properties, the development can't move forward. So they decided to use illegal tactics to force you out. The investigation took a major step forward when federal agents got involved, because the conspiracy involved mail fraud, wire fraud, and civil rights violations. The FBI opened its own investigation. Special Agent Michael Torres met with Marcus and the other victims to explain the federal charges that were being prepared. This case involves organized, criminal activity designed to deprive people of their civil rights based on race, age, and military status, Agent Torres said. That makes it a federal hate crime in addition to all the other charges. Agent Torres also revealed that the investigation had uncovered evidence of similar schemes in other parts of Texas. We think this group has been using these tactics in multiple locations, he said. You may not be their only victims. The federal investigation moved quickly. Within a week, FBI agents raided the offices of Whitman Development, Security Solutions, and the fake Sunset Hills HOA. They seized computers, financial records, and thousands of documents. Robert Whitman was arrested at his home in Austin on charges of conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, and civil rights violations. 3 of his business partners were also arrested. James Walker, the owner of Security Solutions, was found hiding at a relative's house in Oklahoma. During the raids, investigators found detailed plans for the harassment campaign. The criminals had kept records of everything: which properties to target, what tactics to use against different types of victims, and how much money they expected to save by forcing people to sell cheaply. They treated it like a business plan, Detective Chen told Marcus. They calculated that spending a few $1,000s on harassment would save them millions in property acquisition costs. The most disturbing discovery was a list of other veterans in the area who were scheduled to be targeted next. Marcus's name had been at the top of the list, marked as high priority because his property was crucial to the development plan. If you hadn't fought back, they would have moved on to terrorize a dozen other veteran families, Agent Torres said. Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that his resistance had protected other people. This was exactly the kind of mission he had signed up for when he joined the Navy SEALs, protecting innocent people from those who would hurt them. But the legal battle was just beginning. The criminals had expensive lawyers and were planning to fight the charges aggressively. Marcus and the other victims would need to stay strong and continue working with law enforcement to make sure justice was served. This is going to be a long fight, Detective Chen warned them. These people have a lot of money and they're not going to give up easily. Marcus smiled grimly. They picked the wrong group of people to mess with. We've got a Navy SEAL, a retired teacher, a computer programmer, and several other people who don't scare easily. We're not backing down. The investigation had revealed the full scope of the conspiracy, but Marcus knew the hardest part was still ahead. Now they had to prove their case in court and make sure the criminals faced real consequences for their actions. Robert Whitman hired the most expensive legal team money could buy. Within days of his arrest, 3 lawyers from a high-powered Austin law firm were working to get the charges dismissed. They filed motion after motion, claiming the arrests were illegal and the evidence was obtained improperly. But Whitman's lawyers did more than just defend their client. They went on the attack. 2 weeks after the arrests, Marcus received a thick legal document delivered by a process server. Whitman Development LLC was suing him for assault, battery, false imprisonment, and destruction of a legitimate business enterprise. According to the lawsuit, Marcus had viciously attacked 2 legitimate security officers who were performing their lawful duties. The suit claimed that Marcus used excessive military force against unarmed civilians and caused them permanent physical and psychological damage. The lawsuit demanded $5 million in damages. Elena was terrified when she read the papers. How can they sue us? She asked. They tried to kidnap you. It's the intimidation tactic, Marcus explained. They're trying to scare us into backing down from the criminal case. Marcus called the federal prosecutor handling the case, Assistant U.S. Attorney Lisa Rodriguez. She wasn't surprised by the lawsuit. This is standard procedure for organized crime cases, she said. They sued the witnesses to try to discredit their testimony. Don't worry about it. We have video evidence of everything that happened. But the lawsuit was just the beginning of the legal warfare. Whitman's lawyers also filed suits against Maria Santos, claiming she had made false and defamatory statements about their client. They sued Frank Thompson for harassment and stalking after he had tried to take photos of suspicious people near his property. The message was clear. Anyone who cooperated with law enforcement would face expensive legal retaliation. Marcus refused to be intimidated. He hired his own lawyer, a former military attorney named Colonel retired Patricia Hayes. She had experience defending veterans who faced frivolous lawsuits. This is exactly the kind of case I love, Colonel Hayes told Marcus. Rich bullies trying to use the legal system to silence their victims. We're going to destroy them in court. Colonel Hayes immediately filed a countersuit against Whitman Development. She claimed that the original lawsuit was malicious prosecution designed to intimidate a witness in a federal criminal case. She also filed for sanctions against Whitman's lawyers for filing frivolous claims. The legal battle quickly became a media sensation. Local news stations picked up the story of the Navy SEAL who fought off fake police sent by a corrupt HOA, National Veterans. Organizations began paying attention when they learned that multiple veterans were being targeted, but the media coverage was a double-edged sword. Some outlets portrayed Marcus as a hero who had protected his community from criminals. Others suggested he was a dangerous veteran who had overreacted to a simple misunderstanding. A conservative blog wrote, "Veteran uses deadly military training against unarmed civilians." The article claimed that Marcus had brutally assaulted two security guards who were just trying to serve legal papers. A liberal website countered with, Navy SEAL exposes racist land grab scheme. This article focused on how the harassment campaign had targeted minorities and veterans. The conflicting coverage made Marcus uncomfortable. He didn't want to be a political symbol. He just wanted justice for his family and neighbors. The worst media coverage came when a local TV station interviewed one of the fake police officers. Tony Martinez, who was facing federal charges, claimed he was the real victim. Marcus Rivera is a trained killer, Martinez said on camera. He attacked me and my partner when we were just trying to do our jobs. Now he's trying to destroy our lives with false accusations. The interview made Marcus look like a violent veteran who couldn't control his temper. Elena was upset after watching it. They're making you look like the bad guy, she said. Let them, Marcus replied. The truth will come out in court. We have video evidence of everything. But the negative publicity was having an effect. Some of Marcus's neighbors began treating him differently. A few people at the grocery store stared at him and whispered. One parent at Sophia's summer camp asked if Marcus was dangerous to be around children. The pressure was enormous. Marcus was dealing with a federal criminal case, a civil lawsuit demanding millions of dollars, negative media coverage, and suspicious looks from his own community. Elena was having trouble sleeping. The kids were asking difficult questions about why their dad was on TV. Marcus started to understand why so many victims chose to settle quietly rather than fight. The legal system was expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally exhausting. Even when you were clearly the victim, fighting back meant months or years of stress and uncertainty. But giving up wasn't an option. Marcus had seen what happened when good people failed to stand up to bullies. During his military service, he had witnessed the consequences of letting evil people operate without opposition. We're not backing down, he told Elena. These criminals need to face consequences, or they'll just find new victims. The criminal case moved forward despite the civil lawsuits. Federal prosecutors had strong evidence of the conspiracy, including recorded conversations, financial records, and testimony from multiple victims. But Whitman's defense team was skillful and well-funded. They challenged every piece of evidence and questioned every witness. They hired expert witnesses to claim that Marcus had used excessive force against the fake police officers. During depositions for the civil case, Whitman's lawyers were brutal. They questioned Marcus for 8 hours, trying to make him lose his temper or say something that could be used against him. Isn't it true that you enjoy violence, Mr. Rivera? One lawyer asked. No, Marcus replied calmly. But you spent 10 years in an elite military unit that specializes in killing people. I spent 10 years serving my country and protecting innocent people. Did you enjoy the combat missions? Colonel Hayes objected, but the questions continued for hours. The lawyers tried every trick to make Marcus look like a dangerous, violence-prone veteran who had overreacted to a simple civil matter. Marcus endured the questioning without losing his composure. His military training had taught him to stay calm under pressure. But it was clear that the defense strategy was to put Marcus himself on trial, rather than focus on their client's crimes. The same tactics were used against the other victims. Maria Santos was questioned about her immigration status, even though she was a U.S. citizen. Frank Thompson was asked about his mental health and whether age had affected his memory. The Kim family was questioned about their finances and whether they had ulterior motives for opposing the development. They're trying to make the victims look like liars and troublemakers, Colonel Hayes explained. It's a classic defense strategy when the evidence is overwhelming. The legal warfare took its toll on everyone involved. Maria Santos had to take time off work to deal with depositions and court appearances. Frank Thompson's health began to suffer from the stress. Several victims started talking about settling just to make the lawsuits go away. Marcus organized weekly meetings with the other victims to keep everyone motivated and informed. We can't let them win by wearing us down, he told the group. That's exactly what they're counting on. The meetings helped, but Marcus could see the strain on everyone's faces. Fighting the legal battle was almost as difficult as dealing with the original harassment. Then something unexpected happened that changed everything. A whistleblower came forward with new evidence that would shift the entire case in the victim's favor. James Walker, the owner of Security Solutions, decided to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. He provided detailed information about how the conspiracy worked and who had ordered the fake police attack. Walker has records of every conversation with Whitman, prosecutor Rodriguez told Marcus. Phone calls, text messages, emails. He documented everything because he was worried about getting caught. The new evidence showed that Whitman had personally ordered the fake arrest attempt. He had told Walker that Marcus was a problem that needed to be eliminated, and that they should use whatever means necessary to get him off his property. The evidence also revealed that the harassment campaign was even larger than investigators had realized. Whitman's group had targeted over 20 property owners across 3 counties, using similar tactics in each case. This changes everything, Colonel Hayes told Marcus. With Walker's testimony and documentation, the criminal case becomes much stronger, and it makes their civil lawsuit against you look ridiculous. Marcus felt a sense of relief for the first time in months. The legal warfare had been brutal, but the truth was finally coming to light. Soon, everyone would know who the real criminals were. The turning point came when Marcus's story reached the national veterans community. A blog post written by his former Navy SEAL teammate went viral on social media, reaching hundreds of thousands of veterans across the country. Marcus Rivera is the kind of SEAL we're all proud to call brother, the post read. He served our country with honor for 10 years, and now he's fighting to protect his family and neighbors from criminals who think they can terrorize veterans. If we don't stand up for Marcus, who will stand up for us? Within 48 hours, donations started pouring into a legal defense fund set up by Colonel Hayes. Veterans from all branches of the military sent money to help cover legal expenses. A retired Marine general donated $10,000. A group of Air Force veterans organized a fundraising dinner that raised $25,000 in one night. But the support went beyond money. Veterans organizations across Texas began investigating similar cases in their areas. They found patterns of harassment targeting veteran property owners in rural areas throughout the state. The American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and Disabled American Veterans all issued public statements supporting Marcus and the other victims. They called for federal investigations into what they termed systematic harassment of veterans and minorities. Elena was amazed by the outpouring of support. "I had no idea so many people cared," she told Marcus. "Veterans take care of each other," Marcus replied. "When one of us is under attack, we all respond." The community support wasn't limited to veterans. Civil rights organizations recognized the case as an important test of property rights and equal protection under law. The NAACP offered legal assistance after learning that the harassment campaign had specifically targeted minority property owners. Local churches and community groups began organizing as well. Pastor Williams from the county's largest Baptist church organized a prayer vigil for the victims. "These families are under attack for standing up for their rights," he told his congregation. "We need to show them they're not alone." Maria Santos was particularly moved by the support from her church community. "For months, I felt like I was fighting this battle by myself," she said. "Now I know that good people everywhere are standing with us." The media coverage also began to shift in favor of the victims. Investigative journalists dug deeper into Whitman Development's business practices and found evidence of similar schemes in other states. A major newspaper published a detailed investigation showing how the company had used intimidation tactics against rural property owners in multiple locations. The story revealed that Whitman's group had made millions of dollars by acquiring land through harassment and intimidation, rather than paying fair market prices. They had specifically targeted vulnerable populations: elderly landowners, minorities, veterans, and families with limited financial resources. Public opinion turned strongly against Whitman and his associates. Letters to the editor poured into local newspapers supporting Marcus and calling for harsh punishment of the criminals. Social media was filled with messages of support for the victims and anger at the harassment campaign. The pressure began to affect Whitman's business relationships. Banks that had been funding his development projects started asking difficult questions about his legal troubles. Construction companies canceled contracts. Local politicians who had supported his projects distanced themselves from him. 2 of Whitman's business partners decided to cooperate with prosecutors rather than face trial. They provided additional evidence about the conspiracy and agreed to testify against Whitman in exchange for reduced sentences. The additional testimony revealed the full scope of the criminal enterprise. Whitman's group had spent over $200,000 on the harassment campaign, hiring private investigators to research their targets, paying for fake legal documents, and bribing local officials to file false complaints. They had kept detailed files on each victim, including personal information about their finances, family members, and potential vulnerabilities. Marcus's file contained notes about his military service and suggestions for pressure tactics that would be effective against a combat veteran. They studied us like we were enemy targets, Frank Thompson said after seeing his file. They knew everything about our families, our jobs, our weaknesses. The evidence also showed that the harassment was scheduled to escalate if the initial tactics didn't work. Plans had been made to file false criminal charges against victims and to stage accidents that would damage their property. These people were prepared to destroy lives to make money, Prosecutor Rodriguez said. This wasn't just business. It was predatory criminal behavior. As the criminal trial approached, Whitman's lawyers made increasingly desperate attempts to get the charges dismissed. They claimed that their client was a legitimate businessman who had been framed by disgruntled property owners. They argued that the fake police incident was a misunderstanding and that Marcus had overreacted. But the evidence against Whitman was overwhelming. James Walker's testimony was supported by hundreds of documents, recorded phone calls, and financial records. The two fake police officers had also agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. The trial began on a cold February morning. The courthouse was packed with supporters of the victims, including dozens of veterans who had traveled from across the state to show their solidarity. Marcus took the witness stand on the second day of trial. He testified calmly and clearly about the harassment campaign and the fake police incident. Whitman's lawyers tried to make him appear violent and unstable, but Marcus's composed demeanor impressed the jury. I used minimal force necessary to protect myself from what I reasonably believed was a kidnapping attempt, Marcus testified. My military training taught me to assess threats quickly and respond appropriately. These men were not legitimate police officers, and they were trying to remove me from my property by force. The defense lawyers showed the jury video footage of Marcus restraining the fake officers, claiming it demonstrated excessive violence. But Colonel Hayes played the same footage during redirect examination, pointing out how Marcus had carefully avoided causing serious injury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she said, this is what controlled professional response looks like. Mr. Rivera could have killed both of these men in seconds if he had wanted to. Instead, he used precisely the amount of force necessary to stop the threat and protect himself. Maria Santos also testified about months of harassment and intimidation. Her quiet dignity and obvious honesty made a strong impression on the jury. Frank Thompson's testimony about the fake emergency calls was equally compelling. But the most damaging testimony came from James Walker and the two fake police officers. Walker described in detail how Whitman had ordered the fake arrest attempt and had personally approved the use of armed men to intimidate Marcus. Mr. Whitman told me that Rivera was a problem that needed to be solved, Walker testified. He said we should use whatever means necessary to get him off his property, including physical force if required. The fake officer Martinez testified that they had been told Marcus was a dangerous criminal who might resist arrest. They gave us weapons and told us to be prepared for violence, he said. We thought we were performing legitimate law enforcement duties. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Whitman's lawyers presented character witnesses and claimed their client was a victim of a conspiracy by property owners who opposed development. But the evidence against him was too strong to overcome. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Whitman was convicted of conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, civil rights violations, and organizing a criminal enterprise. His remaining business partners were also convicted on multiple felony charges. As the verdicts were read, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Justice had been served, not just for his family, but for all the victims of the harassment campaign. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of supporters cheered as Marcus and the other victims emerged. Veterans saluted. Community members applauded. Local news cameras captured the moment of triumph. This is what happens when good people stand up to bullies, Marcus told the gathered crowd. Evil only wins when good people do nothing. Today, good people won. But the victory in court was just the beginning. Now came the sentencing phase, where Marcus hoped the criminals would face consequences severe enough to deter similar crimes in the future. 6 months after the guilty verdicts, Judge Patricia Morrison called the federal courthouse to order for the sentencing hearing. The courtroom was packed once again with supporters of the victims, veterans advocates, and media representatives from across the state. Robert Whitman sat at the defendant's table in an orange prison jumpsuit, a far cry from the expensive suits he had worn during his development career. His lawyers had filed dozens of appeals and motions, but none had succeeded in overturning his convictions. Judge Morrison had reviewed thousands of pages of evidence and victim impact statements before making her sentencing decision. The federal sentencing guidelines recommended 15 to 20 years in prison for Whitman's crimes, but the judge had discretion to go higher based on the severity and scope of the criminal conspiracy. "Mr. Whitman," Judge Morrison began, "you have been convicted of leading a criminal enterprise that systematically targeted and terrorized innocent families for financial gain. Your victims included elderly citizens, military veterans, and minority families who wanted nothing more than to live peacefully on their own property." Marcus sat in the front row with Elena, watching as justice was finally delivered. His children, Sophia and Miguel, were with him for the first time during the legal proceedings. He wanted them to see that the system worked when good people stood up for what was right. "The evidence shows that you spent over $200,000 to hire criminals, create fake legal documents, and intimidate families into selling their property for below-market prices." The judge continued, "You personally ordered the use of fake police officers to kidnap Mr. Rivera from his home. When that failed, you filed frivolous lawsuits to try to silence your victims." Whitman's lawyer had asked for leniency, claiming his client was a misguided businessman who had made poor decisions under pressure. But Judge Morrison was not sympathetic. "This was not a momentary lapse in judgment," she said. "This was a carefully planned criminal enterprise that operated for over 2 years. You kept detailed files on your victims, studying their vulnerabilities like a predator stalking prey. You showed no remorse then, and you show no remorse now." Judge Morrison sentenced Robert Whitman to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. She also ordered him to pay $2.2 million in restitution to the victims and to forfeit all assets connected to the criminal enterprise. The 3 other defendants received sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. James Walker, who had cooperated with prosecutors, received 5 years. The 2 fake police officers were sentenced to 3 years each. As the sentences were read, Marcus felt a profound sense of closure. The criminals who had terrorized his family and neighbors would spend decades in prison. They would never again be in a position to hurt innocent people. But the victory went beyond individual punishment. The case had exposed systematic problems with how rural property rights were protected and how vulnerable communities were targeted by unscrupulous developers. Within months of the sentencing, the Texas legislature passed new laws strengthening protections for property owners against HOA fraud and harassment. The laws made it easier to prosecute fake police impersonation and created harsher penalties for conspiracy to intimidate property owners. The county commissioners also passed new ordinances requiring HOAs to prove legitimate authority before making demands on property owners. They created a hotline for reporting suspicious HOA activities and established a fund to help victims of property harassment pay for legal defense. The civil lawsuits that Whitman had filed against Marcus and the other victims were dismissed with prejudice. Judge Morrison ruled that they had been filed maliciously to intimidate witnesses in a federal criminal case. She ordered Whitman's legal team to pay the victims' attorney fees, which totaled over $400,000. More importantly, the victims filed their own civil lawsuit against Whitman Development and won a judgment of $8.5 million in damages. The money came from the sale of Whitman's seized assets, including luxury homes, expensive cars, and business properties. Marcus used his share of the settlement to expand his ranch and create something meaningful from the terrible experience. He established the Defend Our Land Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provides legal assistance to veterans and rural families facing property harassment. "What happened to us shouldn't happen to anyone," Marcus told supporters at the foundation's launch event. "We're going to make sure that other families have the resources to fight back when criminals try to steal their homes." The foundation hired several attorneys who specialized in property rights and civil rights violations. They also created an emergency hotline that veterans and rural property owners could call when facing suspicious legal threats. Within its first year, the foundation helped over 200 families across Texas and neighboring states. They stopped 3 other harassment campaigns similar to Whitman's scheme and helped prosecute dozens of criminals who were targeting vulnerable property owners. Elena became the foundation's education director, traveling to veteran events and rural communities to teach people how to recognize and report property harassment. Knowledge is the best defense, she would tell audiences. If you know what to look for, you can stop these criminals before they destroy your life. Maria Santos also found new purpose after the legal victory. She partnered with the foundation to create a support network for elderly property owners who were being targeted by scammers and intimidators. Her own experience made her an effective advocate for others facing similar threats. I spent months feeling scared and alone, Maria said. Now I want to make sure no other family has to go through that. Frank Thompson used his settlement money to upgrade his property's security system and help his neighbors do the same. The rural community that had been targeted by Whitman's scheme became one of the safest and most tightly knit areas in the county. The Kim family decided to stay on their farm and expand their organic vegetable operation. With the harassment ended, they were able to focus on building the sustainable farming business they had always dreamed of. Marcus's ranch became a peaceful retreat where he hosted events for fellow veterans dealing with post-traumatic stress and adjustment issues. The barn where he had been attacked by fake police was converted into a meeting hall for veteran support groups. This place has seen violence and fear, Marcus would tell visiting veterans, but now it's a place of healing and community. That's how we turn something bad into something good. Sophia and Miguel, now in high school, often helped with foundation events and veteran gatherings. They had learned valuable lessons about standing up for what's right and helping others in need. Dad always taught us that with great ability comes great responsibility, Sophia said during a school presentation about the foundation. When you have the power to help people, you have to use it. The ranch itself thrived in the years following the legal victory. Marcus built the workshop he had always wanted and started a small furniture-making business. Elena's garden produced enough vegetables to supply several local restaurants. The family finally got the chickens and goats that Sophia had wanted. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the sense of security and peace that returned to their lives. The harassment and threats were gone forever. The criminals were locked away. The community was stronger and more united than ever. 5 years after the fake police incident, Marcus stood on his porch watching another beautiful Texas sunset. Elena was beside him, reading a letter from a veteran family in Oklahoma who had been helped by the foundation. The kids were doing homework at the kitchen table, their laughter carrying through the open windows. Deputy Johnson, who had become a close friend, stopped by for his weekly visit. "Any regrets about fighting back?" he asked Marcus. Marcus thought about the question seriously. The legal battle had been expensive, stressful, and time-consuming. It had put his family through months of uncertainty and fear. There had been many moments when settling quietly would have been easier. "No regrets," Marcus said finally. "We did the right thing. And because we fought back, a lot of other families are safer now." The ranch was exactly what Marcus had wanted when he first bought it, a peaceful place where his family could build a good life. But it had become something more. It was proof that ordinary people could stand up to powerful criminals and win. It was a symbol of what was possible when communities came together to protect each other. The nightmare that had started with a fake HOA letter had ended with justice, healing, and a stronger community. Marcus had used his military training one last time, not to fight foreign enemies, but to protect his neighbors from domestic threats, and in the end, that mission had been just as important as any he had completed overseas. The fight for justice never really ends. It just takes different forms in different places. Marcus was ready for whatever came next, knowing that his family and community were safe, and that other families would be protected by the foundation they had built. The ranch was quiet now, the way Marcus had always wanted it to be. But it was a peaceful quiet, not the silence of fear. It was the quiet of people who knew they were safe, supported, and home.